So, Nicole, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us about this today. Obviously, a really important issue. First, can you just tell me a little bit about what you do at New Destiny and the impact you see it make on individuals?
Sure. So New Destiny is specifically, our entire mission is focused on permanent housing for domestic violence survivors in New York City and Westchester. As you might know, domestic violence is the number one reason for family homelessness in New York City and commonly around the state and the country. So we have dedicated all of our resources to finding permanent, safe homes for DV survivors and their children.
And where are we at right now when it comes to this type of housing and services?
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, we're still very much a hidden population. In New York City, DV survivors have and again, I'm speaking from where we are, but I know that this is common around the state, is DV survivors are in a separate shelter system. They don't have the same access to housing resources, whether that's Section 8 or other rental subsidies or affordable housing that's being developed. The state has been great partners in trying to remedy that, especially over the last couple of years. So we're very appreciative of the governor and the agencies that have provided both housing capital so that we can build more housing for domestic violence survivors and the supportive services contract so that we can help survivors find stability and move past their trauma. But it's never enough. I mean, we still like in our, just as an example, in our domestic violence shelters in the city, there is a less than 10% chance that you will leave domestic violence shelters for permanent housing. You're either leaving shelter because you time out and you go into another shelter, which just creates more trauma and more upheaval in the mom's lives and the kids' lives, moving schools, moving jobs, so on and so forth. So we're very grateful, but it's just the beginning. And our job, so we build housing, we're providing services for families. We're also doing a lot of advocacy and public education because there's stigma attached to it, and then there's literally privacy, right? We're trying to do what we can for anonymity purposes to keep our families safe from their abusers and the abusers' networks. But the cost of that is that there hasn't been the education about the post-traumatic stress and the traumatic brain injury and all of the associated uh, mental health and physical health realities that our families are going through.
Yeah.
So we're trying to call attention to that.
And from speaking with people like you and victims or survivors, I should say as
Thank
well,
you.
from speaking with them, this a permanent place to live is a whole. It can change a life, right? And I think a lot of people might not understand the dynamics at play without that, because, like you said, there's situations where an individual might have to go back to or can't get out of for a lot of reasons, right, that you just said it. And this is that next step, and this is that bridge, right? This type of the service and housing.
That's exactly it. And
Yeah.
what a lot of people I find don't know is domestic violence is a lot of it is about control, and that includes financial control. So almost 100% of survivors have experienced some sort of economic abuse by their abuser, and that means that even if they are working, even if they have bank accounts, they don't have access to it more often than not. Their credit's been ruined by their abuser. So it is so the domestic violence survivors that we work with, many of them have never had their own lease, and it's really hard for them to get back on their feet if they don't have somebody to help them navigate these economic elements of what they haven't been able to do before. And they need resources to they literally leave home with nothing. They don't have their documents, they don't have any income. So even there's very low income up to middle income, but when they get to us, they have nothing. So and it's really hard to establish credit, establish bank accounts, go back to work if you don't have a place to call home.
Right. And
And then
find.
that's just the beginning for us. Like, this wasn't part of your question, but like, once you find safe housing, it's just as important to make sure that they can keep that safe housing.
Yeah, and find a landlord
That's
or
right.
someone that's going to set that like you just said, all those things for a person that hasn't had to experience this can be
Right.
difficult, right? And then this is all added on top of that.
That's right.
Okay, so we had the state of the state on Tuesday. What did you hear there, or what did you read in the book that you wanted to share some perspective on in terms of your reaction here?
Sure. We are encouraged by the state of the state. I was able to go up and see it in person, and there was a lot of excitement in the air for a lot of reasons. But we won't truly know what's happening until we see the executive budget, which we're uh, eagerly anticipating, as so many others are. I will say the part that resonated most with us and the work that we do is the conversation around affordability. That was a pillar of Governor Hochul's speech, and there was some language in the book that talked about both investing in the capital side, so to allow us and other nonprofits like us to build more housing for survivors and other vulnerable populations, and then also some language around investing in the services so that we can hire staff to help our tenants and others get the case management that they need to get past their trauma. So, but it's the language, as always, is quite vague at these. So, domestic, as I was saying earlier, domestic violence is very much a hidden population and is often um, doesn't have the same access to housing resources and case management resources that other populations do. So we can't really say until it comes out if the agency that funds us will get the funding that it needs so that we can get the contract levels that we need. Um, and I will say that specifically what we're looking for is the New York State Supportive Housing Program. Um, Last year was the first year in 40 years since the program was created that it received a meaningful increase. And so we're very grateful to Governor Hochul and our team for making that increase. But that brings us from 1/6 of the current rate to fund other housing to 1/4 of the rate that other providers have to run their housing. So we the end result was we received this funding, or we are in the process of receiving this funding, and that's great. But we have to choose between hiring more case managers so that we can work with the tenants and our children on their case management needs, their service needs, or security. But it's not enough money to provide both security and services. And so, I mean, that's like asking us, do we want food or do we want water? Our families need to feel safe and they need people to help them recover. So we're quite hopeful with the conversations we've had that they will continue that investment that they started last year for us and other nonprofits across the state.
So, how much more of an investment would help bridge some of those gaps?
Yeah, what we proposed, and we in the supportive housing community at large proposed last year was a 5-year process, knowing that there are a lot of needs in the state. Homelessness is at a record high. So, and this is not the only program. So, we asked for 32 million last year and received just under 18 million. And then this year we're asking for 62 million to make up for last year and then add that additional level of funding.
Yeah, and obviously we know that the backdrop of the federal government here as well
Right.
plays a factor in all this, right? And the continuum of care and what that looks like and that guidance. It also has a role in this too.
Absolutely. New Destiny essentially has two programs. One where we build housing and provide services in the building, and that's what the state funds. And then our other program is to house domestic violence survivors in apartments across the city and then work with them to make sure that they find stability. And that's funded by the HUD Continuum of Care funding. So this is a very tenuous moment where we're concerned about all of our housing. And we serve about 2,400 DV survivors. And uh, we're concerned about not being able to provide support to all of them right now because of the lack of funding and the real risk at the federal government.
There was another wording in there, and I don't know if you read anything into it or not, or if there's something bigger on this. But she did say in the book, looking to provide better guidance on reimbursement for nonprofits, and that includes domestic violence services. This guy is there an issue I get, or is it difficult right now when it comes to that process? Do things need to change a bit there?
There's always improvement with government contracts, but I would say for our funding, not so much. It works pretty well in terms of getting reimbursement, relatively speaking. I think what that is probably referring to is the larger services for domestic violence survivors that we don't have access to. We focus on permanent housing, but most domestic violence providers are focusing on shelter or other services like legal services and mental health services. So um, I suspect that it's for those like licensed providers who are doing that work in non-residential settings.
Interesting. Okay. I also wanted to ask because we've heard so much about housing
Hmm.
and this initiative by the governor in recent years. Have you seen any impact of that? I think it was what, 10,000 was a part of her proposal of supportive housing over the course of this initiative. Has that made it, have you seen anything so far? Because obviously we hear these proposals and some of
Yeah.
it isn't felt for 2, 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road. Have you seen any?
I have. We went into construction in May on a brand new supportive housing project that is funded between the city and the state, but definitely part of the Hochul administration. And we'll have 72 low-income families, half of which will be DV survivors, moving in as soon as we can finish construction in about a year or so. So um, yeah, which I would invite you to come to our ribbon cutting. We'll call you back in about a year if you want to
Okay.
come see it.
Yeah.
But that is, I mean, that is a real tangible product of her investment. And I know domestic violence is personal to her. Um, and so yeah, so that's an example right there.
So just to finish this up, we talk about housing and services and just like you just said, the new units that are going to be coming online,
Hmm.
right? And then the next few years, that every person, I guess, that makes an impact on. What does that mean to you, and how does that
Yeah,
fulfill what you're trying to do there?
yeah. I mean, our mission is to end the cycle of homelessness and abuse. And it's not just in the moment, but it's intergenerational. So what we see, we've had buildings that have been open for decades now, and what we're seeing is the success when we have this housing. We see the success in not just our moms stabilizing, but the kids. And so, like this year, we had this whole cohort of babies that moved in 18 years ago go off to college this year. And so that is like the truest measure of success is finding stability. These families managed to break the cycle, and now seemingly the children have broken the cycle and they're off to four-year colleges.
Right, and that has a ripple
Yeah.
effect on the
Yep.
community, the neighborhood, society, right? Those are
That's
all
right.
good things at the end of
Yep.
the day. That's really
Yep.
cool. Nicole, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.